time and just want to at least get ourselves grounded as everyone is coming in to this space. I'm recording it and it'll stay recording on, I've pinned myself and Indira. If you ask a question, your voice will be recorded. And if there's any discomfort with us sharing it, just let me know at the end and no problem. We won't do it. We will share it with the people that have signed up that aren't able to come tonight. So let's just take a moment and just take a few breaths to just ground ourselves in the spaces that we're in and in this shared space together. And this is an amazing world in which we have technology that connects us from spaces of safety in our home to collective conversation and community and sangha. Just beginning with a heart of gratitude. Welcome, everyone. So Anu is not here this evening. She's out of town, and I want to just give a shout out to Anu for connecting Indira and I. We met before in the past, and so it was nice to reconnect over a conversation, and this kicked off a series. So the next 4 Sundays, if you can join us, we'd love it, as we are having conversations, but also sharing tools of empowerment, of moving beyond fear. And we're speaking very specific to the journey with cancer, also understanding that it's not only about cancer, it's the layers of life that it connects into that world as well. So, and that's one of the reasons I really appreciated this book you've shared, Indira, because you weave it all together so brilliantly. So I'm gonna start to just begin this conversation with Indira and have her share and then offer space for Q&A. Please, in the chat, write any questions that you'd like. There is a little reaction button if you want to do that. And then you can also raise your hand, which I believe is under participants, if I'm right. But if you don't know any of those things, just unmute and ask your question. It's really not, we don't want to make this complicated. So I want to just begin, before we get into the content, writing a book it's like there's a spark that begins that, and then there's a process that begins that. Like, I'm holding this book, and it's the several years in here or in your heart, and there's lots of things in this. And so I just want you first to just speak as a writer. You wear many different layers of life, and we'll speak to that, but I want to welcome you like right now, that this voice, this aspect of yourself as a writer, and welcome, and just anything you want to share as we embark on this journey. Welcome, Indira.
Thank you, Maryam, and my greetings and warm welcome to everybody who's joined. I have to say to begin with that, Maryam, I have so much respect for you. As I was saying, as we came on this call, it's, the work you do to uplift people is so giving, and so you do it so freely, and you do it with such compassion, but also care. And I've been blessed to be part of sessions where I have felt being uplifted by the moment you create. And I'm immensely grateful to be in this discussion with you. I've been thinking a little bit about our discussion as we've been building up. And I just feel this discussion is going to be so spiritually meaningful, and I'm going to learn so much from it. So I just wanted to start by expressing my gratitude, and to everybody for the energy and hope and courage you're bringing to this dialogue. as a writer, I've never really thought of myself as a writer. I've always loved writing, and it's been something that I've done professionally. It's been for proposals, and it's been for papers that are more professionally oriented. And there were periods in my life that I would express my spirit in writing, but just very personally. And so writing, I knew I had to write this book. I just knew it was something that I didn't really have choice about, but it was something that had to come forth from the experience I've had and had to be expressed in a book. And this book happened in a very short span of time. I think I started writing in June of 2020, and the manuscript was complete by the first week in October. And it came fully, and it came openly, and it came freely. And I think that as I've been recording the audiobook and I'm reading the book, it stunned me in terms of everything that I've actually put forth to the world. But I was guided by spirit, so I have to give thanks to that.
Thank you. Thank you. And as a writer, and now that you're reading it, that's such a different experience, but I'm certain you're coming upon pieces of the landscape of the book that just pierce you or remind you of such important moments. And there's many that I picked up in, but I'm curious, one of your favorite moments that you shared in the book that you'd like to read for us as we begin.
Okay. Well, there have been many poignant moments and many gifts of humanity that I've been granted. One of the most pivotal moments was as I was learning my diagnosis after struggling, as it takes time to get to the point of diagnosis. And my doctor, who was actually who's not an oncologist, she's my OBGYN, and I'd known her from pre-children. My children are now 20 and 18, with God's grace. And she devoted herself to helping me get a diagnosis. And she was the first person to get the full weight of my diagnosis. And then she had to translate it to me. And so what I'd like to do is read that passage from the book that speaks to Dr. Meza, who I honor. And I'll read to this. It's Dr. Meza and the Promise. Time stood still. I sat quietly, looking straight ahead at the white door in front of me that led to the rooms and Dr. Meza's office in the back. I couldn't pray. I didn't think. I just waited. It took a while for Dr. Meza to call me back. Just as I was walking in, my mother called my father, and he stepped out to talk to her and tell her I was going in to say hello to Dr. Meza. I walked towards Dr. Meza's office, knowing I was going to face the guillotine. Dr. Meza was sitting at her desk, and she motioned for me to sit down. She got right to it. She said, "Dr. Butch just called. It's spread." I didn't say anything. Dr. Meza continued, "It's in the bones." For some odd reason, I felt relief. In the bones, I thought I could handle it if it was in my pinky finger. In retrospect, I wasn't sure if this was my wretched sense of humor or a defense mechanism at play. I asked, "Where in the bones is it?" "It's in the bones." Where in the bones is it? I didn't understand why she wasn't answering me. I was still fixated on my little finger. I wanted her to confirm that. She didn't say anything. Then she said, "It's everywhere." My mind stopped and my breathing picked up. I could hear myself breathing. It's everywhere? It's everywhere, I thought. I felt the pain in my back, my hips. Suddenly, I felt soreness at the back of my head. Dr. Meza spoke again. It's everywhere. I got it. Yet, I couldn't fully fathom it. It wasn't just in my pinky finger. It was everywhere. How did that happen? Dr. Meza bent across her desk and reached out her hands to hold mine. I leaned forward and stretched out my arms. She took my hands. She said, "Promise me you will fight. Promise me." You know, I think about that moment, Maryam, from the perspective of how we're told of our own calamities. And I think about how Dr. Meza gave me the capacity, or actually she gave me no choice but to fight. And it set the framework for me. So I certainly owe her a debt of gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that and reading that. It really, that was one of there's a few pieces of this that has stuck with me. And that moment was very, it was very capturing, because it is those moments that life stops and you kind of have to reorientate. And as a yoga therapist, I work with a lot of people on the journey with cancer. And I always spend time to say, I want to know when you were told and how you were told and what was said. And I don't think we give it enough attention, because that moment can be, it's huge. And I've had it from where clients are literally, they're left a message on their voicemail that they have cancer, to kind of a very flippant, or, you know, so I just want to share, like, you know, the people that are listening, maybe you've had a journey and or not, or you are around people that have had the journey, honoring that moment and giving space for an individual to speak to that moment is so huge, because it can free up any hurt, and also any beautiful seeds that were planted, like that promise that your doctor asked of you. You kept leaning into it over and over again.
Absolutely. And it wasn't, I mean, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that sometimes we think about how people handle sharing this news with us. And we have to recognize, for them, the professionals that do this day in and day out, they're doing it day in and day out with 45 patients a day, if not more. And for them to survive the kind of calamities they bring onto other people, they have to almost be neutral or turn their heart off. And in this crazy world of liabilities, they also that also curbs compassion. But I think that people have a choice to make. And in remembering their humanity, they can give so much to the patient that they're talking to. And it's pivotal. I think it's probably, I think you said it perfectly, in those moments, you determine your path. And if you are able to determine it with the concept of, yes, I can do something about it. Yes, I can bring my courage to this. Yes, there's somebody who believes in me, or there is God that I can lean on. it allows the fight to start. Otherwise, we're left in this muddle of the elephant on our chest and not being able to exhale to figure out how to even begin the process of fighting. No, fully respect what Dr. Mazur did. And I have to say, I was able to finally give her the book not 6 months ago. And it was a fundamentally important moment in my life. Perhaps it was that full circle of being alive, of being in a place where I could now make an offering against that gift that she'd given me. And from that perspective, I think we just held each other and cried, honestly. And I said to her, "You have no idea what you've done for me." And she looked straight at me and she said, "I know exactly what I've done for you." And you've got to love Dr. Mazur because she's real. And she's also got incredible courage to give of herself. And that's part of this journey that I'm trying to take on for myself, where if we can awaken that, like you're doing with so many people, then the burden is shed.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the desire to lighten the burden, to lighten what we're carrying on the journey, because we need our energy. We need our sattvic energy. We need our energy that's in harmony to move forward. Absolutely. Thank you. And, those of you listening, please, I just want to just make this a call to action, like reflect on the moments when things land in your life. And they can incredibly be dismissive. They can incredibly shut us down. They can incredibly put us into situations, but acknowledging it and then coming out of it, and we release it, we lighten, we shed. Gorgeous word for that. So I want to now shine a light on you there's many different layers, as a mother, as a daughter, family, as a business owner, as a CEO of your company, as a wife. There was all these layers, and I was pretty surprised how you weren't going to shift too much of that. But I want to talk, as myself as a business owner, I want to talk just to that decision of you maintaining this company that you founded, and just anything around that, just how it supported you, how that was in retrospect. Do you feel that was the best decision? Just anything around that.
No, absolutely. Our work sometimes is what creates the best distractions from the challenges of life. And it also is, if you're fortunate enough, as I have been in my life, to do work that is personally motivating, and you feel that you can be part of a larger community, it allows you to hold on to that as you fight your other battles, but it gives you purpose. And I've had the good fortune of being in an entrepreneurial family. My father started his company in 1987 when we moved from India. So that was sort of in my blood, of understanding that sometimes you have to try to own your own destiny. And sometimes to leave your own mark, you have to have your own platform. And more than leaving your mark, it's how best do you, in an unfiltered way, create your contribution. And so the company that was active at the time of cancer, I was going to say, but it's an ongoing battle. So in those days, was a company that was predicated on building equality in how women in international development could work, and how their roles and responsibilities, be it in democracy building or in enterprises or in climate change, could be empowered. So for me, it was certainly and most critically about income. It was also about ensuring the best medical insurance that I could provide for myself and my family, as much as for my colleagues that I worked with. But it was also about purpose. And when you combine all of it as an entrepreneur and as an advocate, even if you have your own baggage per se that you're carrying in other parts of your life, this becomes a way of being normal. And in that space of producing and accomplishing and striving, where in other parts of your life you might have challenges. And so it was a wonderful antidote to crisis, to have work to pour myself into.
Yes, I think this goes so far back, the idea of purpose, to maintain senses of purpose. And I appreciate you brought it up in the book, and you're speaking to it, that the reality of financial, cancer is an expensive journey. It's something that we don't talk about enough in this country, and it's been made quite expensive. And this idea of you have to have income, and that maintaining of income is as a part of that equity piece, that we still have much room to talk about that.
Absolutely. And there are a couple of ways of looking at that. I mean, and it's, if you think about it from that perspective of equity, I can say that one of my doctors, when I went to Memorial Sloan Kettering, and the resources available in New York City is very different from the resources available in Albany in New York. It's also incredibly different in another country. The other aspect of it is the means to the medication, right? I may not be, I'll say this from the perspective that I'm grateful, but I understand how privileged I am. If I were in another country which didn't have Herceptin when I needed it, or if I couldn't afford it, I wouldn't be alive. And I recognize the privilege of being exactly where I was in those moments and in that time. But it also is humbling, because it was by an accident of circumstances beyond my control that I have the license to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for acknowledging. I think these are those journeys, and then it's that idea of return, right? We have that privilege, and then we find ways of returning. And I absolutely feel like this is part of your return of sharing and uplifting, and to remember this balance in the world that we live in of equity and privilege. And I just thank you for voicing to that.
No, absolutely. And I don't know if you're hearing an echo. I don't know if anybody needs to mute just to mention that. But I don't think it is a return, because I honestly feel I continue to gain from the book. It's I've been so fortunate in being able to talk to people I don't know, and learn and gain from those very emotional and spiritually aware moments where you can come together on something that is important to two people, or to, in a scenario such as this where people give of themselves. It's also deepened relationships with people I know. And it's allowed me to free myself from it as well. So I really think I continue to gain from the experience.
May it continue. It's so beautiful. Yeah. So there's some parts of this book that I'm not touching, because I feel, please pick up the book. It's such a beautiful read, and there's a couple things that are just very surprising. But what I really love is how you organized it. And it's like we're on a story. It's like you're getting insight into this journey of your life. And then all of a sudden we can go look behind the corner and look behind the curtain and be like, wow, there was a lot of things going on in the background, which is so real. This is how life is. And then you divided the book into these two parts. And the second part, which I want to lean into a little bit, which you call lessons, I call it the toolkit. It's like then you extract from this journey that you are still on. And I'd like you to kind of speak about kind of where you are in this journey, to giving very concrete lessons or this toolkit. And I want to touch on some of them. And maybe while we touch on them, you can share also kind of, it's not like the journey is over. You're right. You're in a journey of survivorship in a way that sometimes we wouldn't think it's that way, but it is. But I'd like you to speak to that. But I want to start with, let me see. Let me actually, before I go to the specific one, it's about building your narrative. But I'd like to know, like, why did you decide to do that, to like separate those lessons out?
So it's interesting. I'll answer a couple of the questions as I get to a couple of questions you put out there, and I'll tell you how I structured the book and what came first. Just in terms of the diagnosis, and it's an active diagnosis. It's advanced breast cancer with bone metastases, and I was diagnosed in the period of about May, June 2007, after having symptoms which I didn't recognize as cancer, starting even in November, December 2006. And it's interesting because it takes that long sometimes. And one of the key lessons in that is to continue to persevere and follow every pain and every oddity and every doubt till you have a complete diagnosis, no matter how frustrating or how hard or how scary it is. I remain in treatment, and I think that's one of those gifts of life where I have the privilege of getting IV treatments every 3 weeks, which allows the cancer, which is technically in remission, but to be handled at a microscopic space that it might still be in. And again, the privilege of life is that, you know, when Herceptin, this is the wonder drug that I've been on, came out, it was only about 8 years on the market in terms of having been FDA approved. Now, with God's grace, there are multiple other medications that are similar to that and that create hope and create life. The reality is that for somebody with my diagnosis, there isn't a lot of medical experience. And so as I go for this treatment, it comes with side effects, and it comes with debilitating weakness. It comes with tiredness, but it also comes with life. And that is that balance, because, you know, life is not without struggle, whether you call it cancer or something else. But sometimes you have tools, and that's where I've been grateful that I've had the privilege of being able to receive these tools. And writing this book and thinking about writing this book, I didn't know what I had to offer. As I said, I definitely felt I had something to give, to get out, I should say, from within me, from my spirit, but I didn't know what it was that I had to give. And so I started writing the tools first. It was almost as though I had to figure out what was it that I had learned from this journey that I needed to, that would deserve words written on, that would deserve to be words written on a page. And as I was struggling to figure out what this was, I was reminded of an experience I had in my oncologist's office. Dr. Smith has been my steady partner in keeping my wellness strong. And he knows that I'm very open to talking to patients in those moments of diagnosis, because my experiences afforded me that luxury. And he came to me as I was doing treatment, and he asked if I would go visit with a patient who had just come to him with a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis as a second opinion. And yes, of course I would. And so I took my IV stick and rolled it into the his patient rooms in the back. And I don't have much recollection of this engagement with this couple. I remember the gentleman was from Sri Lanka, or had of Sri Lankan descent. His wife was Caucasian. I remember and instantly felt the fear, the magnitude of the fear as soon as I walked into the room. And the first thing I remember them saying to me was, we were just going to go to Thailand because we're adopting our daughter and we don't know what to do. And, you know, my mind went to, how do I get them to go get that baby? And then pushing myself out of that, saying, this is not my place, but drawn to making sure in some ways they understood that life could go on and that child could have a family. And if the worst happened with the husband, the wife and the daughter would have each other. And that's what I remembered from that interaction. But a year or so after, I touched base with Dr. Smith to see how, you know, sometimes you don't want to ask for a number, you know, from your own fear of what happens to somebody as much as privacy. But I did ask Dr. Smith how he was doing, and he said, oh, he's doing great. Did you know they adopted their daughter and he's doing well, he's in recovery. And by the way, did he reach out to you? And I said, no, I haven't heard from him. We never exchanged numbers at the time. And he said, well, apparently you gave him a 12-step process of living well with cancer. I was like, and it's up on his website. So as soon as I started thinking about writing this book, I was trying to find his website to figure out what it was that I'd said, because it might help me. But that gave me enough to say there must be something that'll flow. And so in writing, it became these 14 steps. And that's my purpose in writing this book. A primary purpose is to give my children, give my niece and nephew, give those who are in the midst of it, in whatever cancer it is, my subconscious learning about how to cope. Now, all of it is common sense. We know all of it. So there's no brilliance to it. It's just my experience. And then the second thing that I think I really wanted to do with the book was speak to diagnosis. There are a lot of books on treatments, but there isn't on how do you confront fear, and how do you walk through doubt, and how do you push to advocate for your own self. In this scenario, it was cancer. I also wanted to normalize vulnerability and fear for my children and my family, my kids. It's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to not know. It's okay to fight for yourself. It's okay to say, I will figure it out as I go. It's okay to take on the system. It's okay to lean on people. And that was so fundamentally important to me, because it's almost as though when we first hear of something, it's after the fact. But we all know what it feels like to have the world crash on your head and to feel alone. And so that second part of the book, the middle part of the book, is my thank you note. And really to people, again, I know and I don't know, because strangers carried me as much as my mom and my dad and my brother and sister-in-law who are on this call. Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I found, I love I loved reading this after your story, because it's kind of like it's like sometimes you open the treasure and you're like, oh, here's all the treasures. But then to see the journey of how that treasure box got there, it just was really just beautifully done. So I appreciate it, even though you wrote it first, where you placed it, it made a difference. And I definitely, you touch on things that I don't see touched upon a lot in books that are speaking about one's journey. And in this particular section of the book, you have one called Amrit. And Amrit in Sanskrit is nectar. It's ambrosia. I don't know if that's the same in the Gurmukhi
Yes,
language.
it's holy water.
There we go. And this approach towards the medicine, because this attitude, and I feel like, to be like, we can all be very honest that there is toxicity. Like cancer treatment there's a toxicity aspect to chemo, to radiation, to the medications. And that it's like you have to make a choice. Like I'm going to receive this medicine, or I'm going to be angry at this medicine, or I'm just going to think of the toxicity. What you shared is something that I often invite is like when you're about to receive your chemo, receive it to do its work and then to leave you with the least harm. Like
That's right.
Give it some energy. And so I just loved how you spoke to this. And it's on page 269. I don't even know if you want to read it or if you want to just talk about it. And it's both, you have this like 3 dots. It's the paragraph above it and the paragraph below it. But you can talk to it or you can read it, whatever you're moved to do.
I can talk to it. I think it's, my father was my coach through this. A coach and partner, I would say. He has had wisdom and experience and immense faith. And he understood that fear could be mitigated by faith. And he understood that faith and that purity could cleanse any toxicity. And he captured it in how he expressed it to me, similar to how beautifully you said it just now. We're never going to avoid the bitter medicine that life gives us. I try to say to my 2 kids here, think about it after the medicine has done its work, rather than keeping your mind centered on the toxicity or the challenge you might face through that hardship. But if you think about it 2 steps ahead, where that medicine has healed you, you've almost let it go through you and pass, and your energy and your purity is whole, and you are ahead of that bitter medicine. So the idea that gives you the strength to know that you've already tolerated it in some ways, and you've healed from it, and you are better, even with the challenge of it.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up your father, because he played such a huge role, and the fact that you'd seen this journey in the family without it being named at that point in your childhood. So that's really, thank you I wanted to honor him as you've honored him. Yeah, thank you. There's so many places I've highlighted, and I want to I want to lean into the spirituality, the faith aspect that you just kind of highlighted. That's so important. And then I want to open it up for questions and comments. I just want to say that as we go into that segment, it's so beautiful that we can share the conversation. It's so meaningful to have all of your voices and also be part of this. So please share. It doesn't have to be a question, but just even what's resonating or what's coming up in you. Please feel free to share that. So I want to lean on page 125. And there was a section. It's interesting, when you read just that section that you read for us, there was these very poignant pauses that, when I'm reading it, you don't have a pause, you're just kind of reading it, but those pauses really make it land in a different way. So I love how you read that specific piece. And so if you're moved to read, please do. This is about it's on page 125, and it's the last paragraph. And it leans on a word, and such an important word in the Sikh tradition, Waheguru, Waheguruji. And just this paragraph, like I think it's 7 sentences, like we're all going to go into fear. It is unavoidable. So just that ability to bring yourself out of there, and just this one word that has a lifetime in it. But just I would love to hear your reflection. And if you want to read this particular paragraph, you're welcome to.
Thank you. No, I'd be happy to read it. And it's funny, you read something and you write something and then you read it and you recognize you still live in it. So none of it was easy. And some days, even now, when my focus shifts away from hope, I feel myself get pulled into a downward spiral of fear. I have to steady myself and pull myself together. I have to look up and find my North Star. I have to breathe. I have to call on Vaheguruji to carry me forward. I need to ask for one more day and live fully with gratitude when it is given to me. Thank you, Maryam, for raising this paragraph. I mean, as I said, I'm in active disease, and many of us have our own challenges. And, one of the biggest gifts that my parents gave me was God. And it was just so infused in our lifestyle that it wasn't separate. God wasn't outside of our family or our day-to-day routine. And yet, as I've said to you, not from a lack of trying from my parents, but I never learned the Gurumukhi script. I'm not educated in Sikhism. So my relationship with Vaheguru, or the supreme being, or divinity, or spirituality, is personal. And I've been very fortunate in that it's been that of, I've termed it as an imaginary friend as well. So it's not a place of judgment. It's a place of comfort. It's a place of security. It's a place of where I find and seek my truth. It's a place where I know I will get courage and voice and inspiration. And it's also, I live in the real world. I live in the real world where when my father would walk into a room, or my brother or my son, they're not given the same respect as if they had a different skin tone, or if their hair was shorter, if they were clean shaven. And I appreciate that from the perspective that we all have different traditions. We all have different ways in which we know we're received, and regardless of that, how we have to be. And so part of speaking so truthfully to Vaheguru was to honor my Vaheguru in the form I choose to see him in, which is as Guru Nanak, which is with a turban and a beard, with peace and courage and strength and humanity and spirituality. And what's been incredible for me is my Vaheguru is now something that I feel I can, it's joy. It's being able to speak to Vaheguru without having to find a word that may resonate better for somebody else. And it's also the gifts that I've been getting, as I've been saying, the gifts that I get from this are so immense. It's getting a text last week from a friend from a different religion who's struggling with a health issue with her parent. And she says, I'm praying to Vaheguru. It's a Muslim man saying to me, I prayed to Vaheguru yesterday. It's a Jewish man saying, you know, I almost wish I was Sikh. And it's not that it's an issue of religion. It's more about we're praying for the same to the same. And it's my distinct joy that I can honor my Vaheguru by calling him Vaheguru.
Beautiful. It's just, I always have tears in my eyes when we can have this kind of just earnest conversation around spirituality. And there's a transcendence that spiritual truth will always have, that will break through any dogma or any doctrine, and that starts to become very nameless. And I love how you just shared that example of people of different faiths just being able to lean into this Vaheguru. And I can just say I'm in the yoga community, and there is the Kundalini practitioners that, there's a little, it's not the same as Sikh, but same, different, but the use of Vaheguru, and there's some very beautiful mantras and just music out there with this very important, all-encompassing word, more bhava, or an attitude, but it's like an exclamation point that you use it in this book, that you're celebrating, like Vaheguru, to that all omnipotent teacher. And then it's also it's a word of humility, like, Vaheguru, be close to me, be here with me. And the spirituality, I always kind of laugh when someone says, well, I'm atheist, and I was like, well, you just hang out with me a little bit more, you won't be. There'll be something that you'll lean into. And I appreciate you sharing that. It's not like you are in this devout Sikh, path, and you're reading all the script, but this word was able to lean into you. And so I just invite that. Sometimes it's amazing how we may not walk of a certain path or a faith, but something from that faith just lands in our heart, and to not be afraid of that, to pick it up, to bring it in, to hold it close. And so I wanted to offer and see if you would lead a little contemplation just around this word, a little experience for us to maybe let it land in us.
Maryam, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, when you're in the group, I always want to defer to you and be led by you.
Can we do this together? Do you want
Absolutely.
to open and I'll close?
Absolutely.
Let's do it that way. That's perfect.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
just going to ask, we collect ourselves to, I like my eyes closed when I start getting in tune with my breathing. And I just ask, we just feel our breath. And as we breathe, we take in Vaheguru. Vaheguru. We exhale all that's troubling us. We inhale with Vaheguru and exhale fear. Vaheguru. 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 Vaheguru.
Let a complete exhale. And invite a presence of profound love and joy that may be embodied in any name and any aspect of nature, of life, of your faith. And maybe whisper the name that resonates with you. I invite you, if it resonates, this idea of Vaheguru, of speak it with that feeling that you would want. We're all in our spaces and no one is listening, but maybe speak it with that sense of maybe joy, maybe there is celebration, maybe there's something you're deeply grateful for, and it's with like a Vaheguru, this beautiful, just from the depths of yourself. Or maybe there's this desire to invite the humility of spirit to guide us and to lighten our burdens and to heal our wounds. Vaheguru, Vaheguru. Or Vaheguru. You know, let it be what it needs to be. Just say it a few times for yourself. Inhale and maybe open the arms up and out, and maybe this little bit of a Vaheguru. Yeah, thank you for allowing that experimental of our conversation. Thank you. It's a word that's sprinkled throughout, and I always would pause at it and be like, okay, what is the intonation, the vibration in that moment? Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, so I want to actually open it up for comments and questions right now. I have a couple more things I'll ask, but I'm going to unpin us and just kind of open up space to see each other. As much as this is great, it's nice to see that there's other humans out there with us. So welcome. And just any comments, anything you want to share that's on your heart, you're on the journey, please share. We're holding space in the highest for all of you. Yeah, welcome any comments and questions, go for it. I know, Sue, you put a comment in, and sometimes I don't know what's happening in the home, but feel free if you want to speak to that idea of faith as well. Thank you, Siddharth. I'd like to say something. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a comment, and my mother might have a query. I have many queries, but I'll hold them for the time being. My comment or just response is that, Indira, your book, as I read it, represents just it shows this clarity of insight, just clear-eyed viewpoint. And I've got to imagine that not everybody's going to write a book, but everybody has these clear-eyed, clear moments of contact. And I really appreciate how you laid it out, that contact with faith, joy, community, purpose. I so benefited from reading it and feeling like I was sitting there with you, and you've advised me in other parts of my life. I found this book to be that wise guide, and for you to put it into the format of your writing as an expression of that clear-eyed contact, that to me was such a gift. And I also want to claim for all of us that we have these gifts. Do, you know, sometimes they shower from the sky, sometimes they feel hard to see, but when we have them, they are so precious. And for you to make a repository of that clear contact with spirit and experience and life in the face of fighting for life, just so much gratitude for this.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you. That means a lot to me. We've been on the road a few times around the block in life and work. And, you know, I think that when you give yourself to spirit and you give yourself to purpose, then it's really not about you, right? It's about what comes from it. And so I feel fortunate to perhaps be a vehicle for that experience. And, you know, this powers me, this really fuels me in terms of maybe there is work I still need to do.
I will share briefly. I put a note in the chat. I thought your faith story was beautiful, and maybe it'll connect me with mine at some point here. The journey of supporting someone through a long road with cancer is very painful and challenging. And I look forward to reading your book and seeing what kind of tools are there.
Thank you so much for sharing your pain and your courage. And, you know, sometimes when we go through something ourselves, we don't remember the suffering that the people around us have taken on. And we forget to give thanks. So allow me to thank you.
Thank you.
And whether it's God or whether it's energy or whether it's your goodness, you know, you're carried forward with that. And your strength will continue to come from that.
Yeah, thank you. I really look forward to reading your book.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for sharing. Siddharth, I don't know if your mom wanted to say something.
I don't know, but I think Nisha may be ready. She
Okay,
unmuted.
perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
go for it. Perfect.
Well, Indira, I wanted to say thank you. You know, there's a point in your book where I think it's Dr. Smith who says, you know, whatever you have, you know, we should bottle it or something, words to that effect. And I think in this book, what you've done is basically tried to bottle it, give others a roadmap for how to absorb a diagnosis and then how to move forward from that. And that was just an incredible act of love and an act of courage. And I'm just really awed by you that you had the kind of clarity to be able to distill the experience that you went through in a way that is so understandable and accessible to others. Really, really just impressive book, and it speaks to who you are, and thank you for what you've given to everyone else.
Thank you, Nisha. It's really grateful for that. And, you know, I have to say that I started writing the book to Megan and Arman and Zaiba and Arjun. And it could be nothing less than my best and nothing less than my truth. And the fact that it became a book and it got published and it got in the hands of more than my kids who are yet, you know, I think Saiba has read more than the other three. I mean, and I've told them to read it when they're ready. It's meaningful that, it's very meaningful that our paths connect through the book for me. Thank you. Yes.
Beautiful. Any other thoughts? And
Yeah.
oh, fine. Perfect.
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much. I heard about this. Is very nice. I have a question. I'm going to support my spouse actually, and I have doubt how I'm going to doubt I have how I'm going to help him to ease this pain and what we are going. It's just beginning.
That's right.
Yeah. So I want to learn, and please give me some advice.
There's nothing I can tell you, Auntie, that I wouldn't learn from you. I mean, you have, you know, I know Siddharth. I know what's in your heart by what I see Siddharth is. And the first thing I would offer is prayers. And I would also say, with all truth, that we have to walk through the pain. We have to walk through the pain. And we have to see ourselves on the other side of pain, where there is healing, where there is recovery, where there's joy, where there is celebration. And if we hold on to that, then the pain passes quickly. The other reality about pain or crisis is it's short-lived. It doesn't take over our lives. It takes over what we let it take over. And I think the truth of it for me is we have to really manage the pain from a medical perspective that we can. I believe my father was diligent about this. We get second opinions and third opinions. We make sure that we are doing the best we can medically in the country we live in the city we live in, with the insurance we have and everything else we can bring to it. That's within our power. The second thing is advocacy, because sometimes we don't speak up and say what we need. You know, I've been through surgeries or I've been through medical scenarios where I've had to say, look, we need to manage this pain better. So being in a place where you can communicate with your spouse and how to mitigate pain he's physically feeling is something that we have to give voice to. Sometimes we defer to authority or what we see as authority in the medical professionals. And we say, oh, they know best. I've learned you've got to second and third check them, making sure that with the second opinion, with the medical with the surgeries, with the chemotherapies, you're staying on course with awareness of what they're doing. The third aspect, more in terms of a logistical perspective, is how do you ease the experience of that medical pain that you have to go through? How do you create comfort through, in my case, prayer or meditation or acupuncture or acupressure? There are things that you can do to mitigate how energy can travel through and ease the body. The main thing I would say is, for me, which was fundamental, and I'll speak just from my perspective, we don't want to be treated different. Right? We're still the same person. We still have our dignity, and we still want to be treated with the same respect we were treated yesterday. And the second aspect of it is ask me. What is it that I can do to help you in a way that you need, not the way I need to help you? There's a world of difference in what you can do versus what he may need. And sometimes we're not trained to express ourselves in terms of our own needs. And so it may be that you ask in different ways. And it's also from the perspective of maintaining your own strength. Because in your strength lies his recovery too. And in bolstering yourself and taking the support you need in dealing with this with faith and prayer and complete belief that he will be well, then that's all there is to it.
Beautiful. Thank you for asking a very hard question,
Yes.
Auntie. Yeah, very courageous.
That's right. I'm drawn to reading one pivotal part that I think speaks to this decision of building wellness, if I may.
Please.
One of the steps, or one of the tools, it's step 4, it's the decision. As the process of diagnosis unfolded, and my life hung in limbo between what seemed like life and a very painful death, something within me built strength and allowed me to keep putting one foot in front of the other. After my first PET CT scan and the impromptu meeting with Dr. Mazur, when I learned that the cancer had spread through my skeleton, I drove home alone with Vaheguru. With thoughts and emotions on hold, the familiar streets whizzed past me as I drove. I pulled into my driveway, walked out of my car, and turned my key in the lock to open my front door. I thought I was living in an alternate reality. This was no longer my world, my existence. I was breathing, but not taking in breaths. The stairs up from the first level to the main level didn't feel familiar. There was a stillness in my home. As I came up the last steps to the main level, where my home represented my children, and looked around, I saw my life. I saw Armand's little yellow magnetic John Deere trucks lining the floor from where he had left them before he went to school that morning. I saw piles of dolls, cuddly toys, and teacups where Megan had stacked the remnants of her last tea party. I started to recognize the room, my home, to breathe. I started to take back my life. I knew that stillness would become a reality if I stopped breathing. I walked into the kitchen and instinctively started washing the breakfast dishes. I vigorously soaked and scrubbed the dishes. I took on living. On some level, the decision had now been made. There was no proclamation, nor did I say it out loud or even to myself. It was too early for me to know what that decision, made on a subconscious level, even meant, or that I had even made it. The decision needed time to ferment. Slowly, it started to make room in my body and take shape. My emotions took much longer to follow. Before hope came to me, I had already made the decision. My children were then 5 and 3. They still needed me, and I was not going to walk away from them, even if God came to get me. My marriage was crumbling, and I could finally begin to admit that. I couldn't rely on their father to be both parents for them. My maternal family had suffered enough. My father had lived with cancer since I was 12. I was not going to die on their watch. I was not going to die. That was just it. It wasn't an option. It wasn't bravado. It was much more than ego. It was a fundamental decision I made that reverberated in every cell of my being. It rose from the depths of my spirit and into my consciousness. It got grounded in the reality I chose. Every day, as I did my morning prayers, I thanked Vaheguruji, my God, for today and asked for one more day. That one decision, made subconsciously and vigorously defended in practice, helped me understand some basic truths about my own power. We decide when enough is enough. The power of a disease over the whole of one's life, a toxic relationship, a bad job, even depression. On some fundamental level, we have to make our own choice. We have to have that much conviction in ourselves. Lesson, make your decision. If you want it, choose life. My prayers remain always with Uncle, as Siddharth knows, and for the courage we all need, because no matter what, we each carry our own crisis, and not just one. We often carry crises with us. But it's in these spaces where we can just be together, where we know that we can lean on each other, that I get strength, and I'm grateful.
Beautiful. That was the one question. That was one of the sections I wanted to talk to so beautifully that you brought that in, because that was such a powerful tool of just, there's lots of people telling you all these decisions you need to make, but there's this one fundamental decision that is really just in your hands.
That's it. It doesn't matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether you have control. Don't take away the power that you have from yourself, because you have immense, immense power. And that power is simply your consciousness that you connect to yourself. We are so mired in the task. I don't remember to breathe. But when we take that breath, like you walked us through, your power is there then. You know that it fills you. And it doesn't mean that you'll know what the outcome will be, or when something will happen, or what. Doesn't matter the what. It's owning that courage It's treating yourself with kindness. It's allowing yourself patience for the healing.
This is a big part of this series that we created, is so much to what Siddharth, your mom, is speaking to, is this, it's like, what are the tools? And so I'll come back to offer space for any further comments, but I just want to share the series because this is kicking it off. And next week, Anu, who introduced Indira and I, is going to be talking about the power of nourishment and nutrition on the journey with cancer, and also prevention. And Ileana is our Ayurvedic director at Beloved, so she's going to lend an Ayurvedic lens on this as well. Then the following week, myself and Susan Kilday, who offers bedside yoga therapy at the Inova at Shar Cancer Center, we're going to share tools, like very specific tools that have been, that there's evidence-based of how impactful they are on helping support the journey. And then the power of touch. The last week is 3 people, Ileana offering Marma therapy, Tamao Albert speaking to Reiki, and she's also an oncologist, an oncology massage therapist, and Yuli of Yuli Therapeutic Massage in McLean, and they train their massage therapists in really beautiful ways with the treatments that are helpful in the journey with cancer. But all these segments you're going to learn, and I can't emphasize enough about the journey with cancer in the medical system. They have their responsibility and their job to do. They cannot give you all of it. And it's a responsibility of not just you, but of the community to help empower the other layers. And so through nourishment, touch, breathing, remembering the stories of those that have gone through it, leaning on them, it's so impactful. Individuals uplift community, and then community uplifts individuals. We need both. And this is a community right here and right now. And thank you, Indira, for being the individual that's uplifting us all.
Mutually.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. Thank you. Want to offer if there's any other questions or comments. Just want to offer that before we close up. Any other thoughts? All good.
I will actually go.
Okay, perfect. 2 of you.
I've been through my own struggle, but it's different because it was based on Lyme disease, and there was cancer involved as well. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. I'm going to get emotional because this hits home.
It's okay.
For breathing with you.
Thank you for holding them, because there's so few places that organize things of this nature that are so beautifully done, and also just for the greater good of the community. And so I just wanted to say thank you, and I look forward to the rest of the series.
Thank you so much for sharing your voice. To uplift you. Thank you, Jennifer. Sangeeta.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Maryam and Indira Didi, for this beautiful evening, for allowing us to be part of this beautiful platform. We've learned so much in the space of an hour. And that's just one comment I had, is that, I mean, we've known Indira Didi since before this happened, during the process now. But what continues to amaze me is the strength that she continues to bring to each and every one of us. And that it sometimes you wonder, where is it that she gets that strength from? She brings us so much joy. She still is able to guide us wherever we need it. She gives herself wholly and fully to each and every one of us. And I think, she always thanks everyone, but I think it's also really important to thank her for everything that she does for us and for the community, for everyone. And you can see that today as well, how much strength she's brought to so many people who've been listening to her. And the book in itself, I think also, it's not one of those books where you just read it and, you put it aside and, oh yeah, it was a good read. No, it always stays with you. There's always something, and there's always something new that comes up whenever we've had the opportunity to listen to through different platforms about the book and book discussions. But every time we learn something new, we see something in a different light. And I just really, really enjoyed the session today. And thank you, Indira Didi, and thank you, Maryam, for this evening.
So I have to say, it always makes me emotional when my family is part of it, because I honestly owe it to them.
Is there any closing thoughts, Indira, you'd like to share?
I think gratitude is a wonderful space, right? Because when we're not thinking and we're just doing, and we're only feeling the pain, and we're only allowing ourselves to sit in doubt, we're not recognizing that we're breathing. And we're not recognizing that we have love. We're not recognizing that other than one part of our body, everything is working perfectly. And my father would always say, "You're perfect." He would say that to my Arjun, who's on screen now with Sangeeta. He would say it to our whole family. And I never really understood what that meant. But we are perfect because we are God's creation. And if we recognize that goodness in ourselves, that we seek outside of ourselves, and we give thanks for that, and we celebrate from that, from a place of humility, gratitude just eases the pain, and it just allows you to receive. I think that if you operate or you function or if your antennas tuned to gratitude, your receptors are open. And I think that's been, I hate to say it, that you can find gratitude even in the midst of your hardest challenge. And you don't have to take away your fears. You just have to create more room for hope. And you have to create that by just leaning in to gratitude. And, thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Arjun. Thank you, Monty, Megan, and Arman, and Pop. Thank you to each of you for listening. It's really a gift to me because, you don't exist in a vacuum. It's only when this energy is shared and given as freely as we felt it in this time, that breath comes easier. So I just want to give gratitude.
No, thank you so much. And we're so grateful for you and your presence in this world. And we have a tradition at Beloved, and if you're up for it, join me. If you can at least open the camera or unmute. And this is for you, Indira. We're just gonna send you a Jai, Jai. Jai is that just celebration of your beingness and your heart and your light. And you're absolutely right that literally gratitude changes your vibration and every cell opens up to its receptors. I mean, there's science that backs up exactly what you've said. And so with a heart full of gratitude, we send you a big Jai. So join me, unmute yourselves if you can, or open up, and then on an inhale, maybe bring out your hands. Jai!
Jai.
Jai. Thank
Thank
you,
you
each
so
of
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Indira.
Maryam. Grateful for what you create.
Honored. Have a beautiful evening.